The NFL draft has officially finished as of this weekend. And honestly, although I hated the trades, although I did not like the trade in the first round to give Jamison Williams to a division rival and giving Christian Watson to a divisional rival, I do like Kwesi's first draft. It was his first draft, and he did well. A lot of these players that came into this team, he swung on late, and he maybe overdrafted on a few players, but we're going to be grading all of these draft picks on today's episode of Morning Kickoff. Starting off with Lewis Cine, our first round draft pick after trading down with the Detroit Lions in a terrible trade. We drafted Lewis Cine with the 32nd overall draft pick from Georgia. I already talked about this draft pick a little bit already. I do really like the draft pick of taking Cine with the 32nd pick, but I hate the trade of trading down and getting just a third round draft pick for it. But in our draft day trades, we're going to be, or in our draft day grades, we're going to be talking about just the value of the player at the draft pick that Kwesi was able to get him at. And to get Lewis Cine at the 32nd draft pick, I'm going to give this one a B+ because I do really like the draft. I really like the draft pick a lot. Just comes down to the trade that I absolutely despise. And we already did a little rant on this already, so we're not going to do all of that quite yet. Still a little bit under the weather. Next up, we have a pick that I absolutely like. A player that I wanted the Vikings to take with the 32nd pick, but they traded down and then traded back up for him. And that is Andrew Booth Jr., the corner from Clemson. The Minnesota Vikings drafted him with the 32nd or 42nd overall draft pick after trading up above, I believe it was the Baltimore Ravens, if I can remember right. The Vikings traded above someone. Maybe it was the New York Giants to get Andrew Booth. I give this draft pick an A. Booth Jr., if it wasn't for his injuries, would have been a first-round draft pick. No question. He is arguably the most raw talent in this draft class when coming to the cornerback position. Now, obviously, he wouldn't have been drafted above maybe Sauce or Stingley, but with that being said, he would have been probably the third corner off the board if it wasn't for his injury concerns. He's an already developed, already established corner from Clemson, and now coming to Minnesota could, and I would put my money that he's going to be a day one starter on our defense. To get a day one starter at the corner position in the second round is a massive win for Kwesi in this organization. I absolutely love this draft pick, and I would have taken him with the 32nd pick if I was the Vikings team, but no, 10 picks later were able to find Booth Jr., and I absolutely love this draft pick. We also saw Roger McCreary taken before Booth Jr., which came by a little bit of a surprise. In all of my mock drafts, I did have Booth going in the first round because I felt like despite the injuries, he still was worth a first round draft pick. Felt like a lot of GMs felt a little bit differently, but still so excited to have him come to our team and will probably be a day one starter and develop alongside Patrick Peterson. Next up in the third round, the Minnesota Vikings drafted Ed Ingram, the offensive guard of LSU, with the 59th overall draft pick. Guard being a big need for the Vikings. I've talked about interior offensive line being maybe the third biggest need for this Vikings team after corner and edge. The first offensive player off the board that the Vikings took was in the third round with the 59th pick, taking Ed Ingram, and I give this a C. I give it a C, less of a anything against Ed Ingram. It's more just about the players that were on the board that I rather would have the Vikings taken with this draft pick. I don't hate him like a lot of fans do. I just believe that taking this Oklahoma edge rusher Benito would have been a much better draft pick, or taking Travis Jones, the nose tackle with UConn. We could have kicked him over to defensive end and played alongside Harrison Phillips. I believe there's a lot of better options for the Vikings to have where they could have taken someone. This was actually a second round draft pick where they could have taken someone who could have been a day one starter on our team. And now Ed Ingram coming onto this team will likely give Jesse Davis a run for his money. I don't believe he's going to be at all a fail in the NFL. It's just I rather would have seen other players come to this team. So for that reason, I give it a C. But with that being said, I'm excited to see him come play for our team. And hopefully, please, for the love of God, can we finally hit on a guard for once? I mean, I guess we can throw Ezra Cleveland as a hit for a guard. He was drafted as an offensive tackle, though. I don't remember the last time the Vikings drafted a guard and it actually worked for our team. It seems like every year we have a hole on our offensive line and it's right at the guard position. And I'm just hoping for once we can see a player come onto this team and be a hit. And hopefully can give Jesse Davis a run for his money at right guard. I really like this Vikings offensive line this next season, a lot more than I did this last year. And I'm hoping Christian Darrisaw can stay healthy, because that's really where that's what we really need for this team. We cannot have Rashad Hill or someone starting at left tackle for our team if he's even going to be on a roster next season. We don't even know yet. In the third round, the Minnesota Vikings, with the 66th overall draft pick, took Brian Asamoah, the linebacker of Oklahoma. Okay, third round, taking Brian Asamoah. Big overdraft, if you ask me. And I give this draft a D, this draft pick a D, because of the reason that I'm about to bring up. The Minnesota Vikings, with the 66th overall draft pick, took a special teamer. Yes, I'm serious. In the third round, 66th overall draft pick, the Minnesota Vikings took a player who's going to be primarily a special teamer for our team. And I've seen people all over Twitter and Reddit talking about, Kwesi just wanted to draft him because he was from Ghana, and so is Kwesi. I really hope that's not the case, and our GM is not drafting players based off of the country they're from. But that can't be the case at all. I'm sure that they have more plans of using him than a special teamer. Asamoah is undersized and he's super fast, and this guy can definitely work as a special teamer. No question he's going to be on a roster and be able to work in the league. It's just in the third round, when you take a linebacker, you want them to potentially be a starter. And as of right now, I don't see any starting caliber linebacker in Brian Asamoah. And this is especially with the players that were still on the board for the Vikings to take. If they wanted to take a starting caliber linebacker, they could have took the Chenal guy from Wisconsin. We also had Travis Jones still on the board, who we could have taken and thrown at defensive end. There were multiple tight ends on the board who I would have loved to see come to our roster as well, who could have been easily the second best tight end on this team. Going to Jeremy Ruckert, who I've talked about already, and going to this Dolchik guy, there were multiple names who could have been easy tight end twos on this team, who could have played a big primary role on this Vikings offense or defense. And yet the Vikings went with someone who's going to be primarily a special teamer for our team. And for that reason, I have Brian Asamoah from OU being a D, just because there's so many players who we could have taken instead. I didn't like the draft pick. I'll give him a chance, like I'll give everyone a chance. Just still, I would have much rather have seen the Vikings take some other positions, because there were tight ends and defensive linemen on the board who could have easily have worked in the league. Even on the second team would have been great, but the Vikings went with a linebacker, or a linebacker who's going to just be a special teamer. So not a big fan of that. Also in the fourth round, the Minnesota Vikings took Akayleb Evans, the corner from Mizzou. I actually like this draft pick. A lot of people don't. And Akayleb Evans needs a lot of development. He's not, unlike Booth Jr., like I just talked about, he is not raw talent. He's not a player who's just going to be able to throw out there and be able to compete against NFL receivers quite yet. The reason why the Vikings took Akayleb Evans, I'm sure Ed Donatel and Mike Pettin are have their eyes on this guy and want to coach him up. I'm sure this is not just Kwesi trying to swing on another corner, because in the press conference he did say that having depth at the position is very crucial, which is true. However, I believe this was more our defensive coaching staff looking at a player they can coach up. For that reason, Akayleb Evans, fourth round draft pick, 118th overall pick, I give this a B+, just because I believe that he will be able to be coached up with our coaching staff. And we especially needed corners. I've talked about it many times. This is by far the biggest need on this roster. With Patrick Peterson being a starter, we didn't know who was going to play alongside him. Now, we're assuming that it's going to be Booth Jr., if not Cameron Dantzler. But outside of that, we have no corners who are going to be ready to step up. We saw a little bit of Harrison Hand. He shined a little bit. Chris Boyd shined a little bit in the preseason this last year. But let's be honest, we don't want to see any more of Chris Boyd on the field. So we're hoping we can see some other corner like Akayleb Evans able to step up. The fifth round, the Minnesota Vikings took in-house from Ski-U-Ma Golden Gophers, row the boat, Otomewo. The Minnesota Vikings drafted him in the fifth round with the 165th overall draft pick, and I give this a B. I believe he's going to work perfectly. Just like how I talked about Akayleb Evans, I am sure Ed Donatel and Mike Pettin had their eyes on this guy and have a role for him to play. Now, him falling to the fifth round was no big surprise. Obviously, in college, he was a star, especially against the run, but him falling to the fifth round should not come by a surprise to really anybody. Him coming onto our defense will likely play that outside linebacker role could be behind, likely behind Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith his rookie season. I don't expect those players. If they do go down with the injury, I'd still expect to see DJ Wanham or some other outside linebacker step in. I don't expect to see Otomewo anytime soon, but as a backup, I believe he can develop under these maybe future Hall of Famers, these all pros, Pro Bowlers that are in front of him. So him to develop under those players, we could likely see this player be better against the run and hopefully can improve as a pass rusher as well. But still, so excited to see him come, a player that I watched a lot in college, and I'm so happy that he's staying in Minnesota to play from maroon and gold to purple and gold. And I love this draft pick a lot. So I'm going to give this one a B. I believe it was solid. I like it a lot. And in the 5th round as well, the Minnesota Vikings with the 169th overall draft pick, just 4 picks after taking Otomewo, took Ty Chandler, the running back from UNC in the 5th round. I give this an A. Ty Chandler, massive, massive swing. And I really believe this is going to be, I think he's, with Ty Chandler, if I were to make a prediction, I think he's going to be a solid backup running back. I know Todd McShay and some players have, or some draft people have talked about him being a potential starting running back. Personally, I don't see it. He's not a pure running back. He's mostly one of those hybrid running backs who gets a lot of the yards from receiving yards and then also is very fast. So he's kind of that hybrid running back. He's not a pure running back. He's not anywhere near Adrian Peterson or Dalvin Cook level where he can just run past guys, run through guys. With Ty Chandler, though, I believe he's going to be a solid backup running back and will play a significant role on this Vikings offense after we do move on from Alexander Mattison. Looking at Ty Chandler, him falling to the 5th round again should come by no surprise, but still I give this an A because I really do believe he's going to work on this Vikings offense. And if there's one position we should be happy about drafting is running back. We seem to never have bad running backs, and no matter who we draft, they seem to always work. Alexander Mattison worked, Dalvin Cook worked, Kane Nwangu worked. I mean, every running back we draft seems to work, so I'm sure Ty Chandler will also work. Looking at Chandler over here, though, he's a little bit of an undersized running back, but that's not a problem. I believe the running backs being 250, 6'9" or whatever, or 6 or 6'2" is usually what it actually is. But I believe those massive running backs, that era's over. It is. They still work. I mean, look at Derrick Henry. The guy runs through guys. I mean, there's still running backs like that who work in the league, and they outlast running backs like Kamara or CMC. But looking at Ty Chandler, he's more of a hybrid running back, smaller guy, but the guy is fast. He runs a 4.38. Are you kidding me? But he is a smaller guy, so he will be able to make some receiving yards, and hopefully yards after contact will be his main, or yards after the catch will be his main role on this Vikings offense. But I really am excited to watch Chandler play in the preseason, especially. I'm so stoked to watch this player play. We have a serious competition at running back right now, with obviously Dalvin Cook being our starting running back, our backup running back being Alexander Mattison. We really don't know who our running back 3 is going to be right now. Because realistically, you want 4 backs on your roster. You don't want anything more on your active roster. And assuming that we keep CJ Ham as a fullback, we don't know who the running back 3 is going to be. Is it going to be Kane Nwangu, who we're going to also have as our kick and punt returner? That'd be my guess. Or are we going to trade away Alexander Mattison and have Chandler or AJ Rose try to play for that running back 3 role? I really like that a lot, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more because I believe the Vikings actually should trade away Alexander Mattison, as he has 1 more year left on his rookie contract, and the Vikings don't plan on bringing him back. I don't assume that they do. But still, Chandler not being a pure running back, I can't give it an A+, but still love the draft pick a lot, and he's going to step up and hopefully be a very good backup in the future. Now going into our 6th and 7th round draft picks, I did not grade our 6th and 7th round draft picks because, let's be honest, more likely than not, these players are never going to play a regular season game. But for a 6th round draft pick, Vederian Lowe, 6th round draft pick, 184th overall draft pick from Illinois, offensive tackle. This guy is huge and massive offensive tackle. So he's the kind of offensive tackle where you can't go through him, you have to go around him. And if we look at Chandler, this guy reminds me a lot of Orlando Brown Jr. This guy, hold on, let's look over here. So if we head on over to our screen again, this guy is huge, but grades terrible in multiple categories, just like Orlando Brown did. The guy is slow. He can't jump, he can't move around, but this guy is huge. He is 6'4", almost 6'5", and 314 pounds. So the guy is, like I said, an offensive tackle who you have to go around. You can't go through him. But still, him stepping onto our team, still, Vederian Lowe could be a backup offensive tackle on the active roster. I'd expect him to start his career out on the practice squad. I don't see the guy being on the active roster anytime soon, unless if we do see Christian Darrisaw suffer with another injury or Brian O'Neill suffer with another injury. I just don't think he's going to be on the active roster starting up this upcoming season because he has a lot to work on in order to be in that role. But still, having a backup offensive tackle is a big need that he's going to fill on this roster, and I'm excited to watch him play and see what he can do for our team. Next up, Jalen Nailor. It took until the 6th round the Vikings took a wide receiver. Wide receiver is one of the biggest needs for our team, and I've talked about it being the 6th or 7th biggest need for this team, and we didn't take a wide receiver until the 6th round. So I guess Dan Chisholm's happy about that. He'll probably make the roster again. Jalen Nailor, the wide receiver from Michigan State, was drafted in the 6th round by the Vikings with the 189th overall draft pick. Big need he needs to fill right now, because if you're looking at our Vikings roster, obviously we have one of the best receiving duos, if not the best receiving core in the league right now, but we just don't have a whole lot of depth at wide receiver. With Dan Chisholm and BC Johnson also reaching the end of their contracts right now, and then you have Ihmir Smith-Marsette going into year 2. So outside of that, we really don't know who our wide receiver 5 and 6 are going to be in the future. Nailor's going to maybe be one of those players. I guess he's competing for the position right now. He has to earn his role on this roster. We can't assume that this guy's going to be able to be here, especially with his size. This guy is tiny. But with that being said, look at his tape. Like I say many times, tape says more about than your combine. I think a lot of people overvalue the combine a lot more than realistically their tape in college. Because looking at Nailor, he's an already established wide receiver. This guy has a very versatile route running tree, and you can use him in multiple different ways. I understand he's small, but we see multiple small receivers work in the league. So Nailor maybe can be that next guy up. With that being said, I see his ceiling as a slot wide receiver if you were to ask me, but still a wide receiver 3 role going forward. We could look at that. Maybe we don't bring back KJ Osborne. Maybe KJ Osborne's going into his, he has 2 more years left on his deal, I believe, and maybe after that we don't bring him back. We don't know what to expect going forward. Adam Thielen, I talked about, maybe this is his last season with the Vikings. There are a lot of possibilities at wide receiver where when the Vikings pay Justin Jefferson, we might not be able to afford a lot of these other players, because assuming the Vikings pay Justin Jefferson top 3 paid money, we don't have anybody else alongside that if we move on from Thielen and Osborne. So I'm excited to see Nailor come onto our team and excited to watch him in the preseason. I still expect that he would start the career out on the practice squad, and we actually keep Chisholm as a wide receiver 6 because he's primarily a special teamer as well. So still a big need at wide receiver for the Vikings to fill, but that's okay. For right now, that's all right, because we still have Thielen and Osborne and Ihmir Smith-Marsette and BC Johnson, so no problem at all. Now in the 7th round, the Vikings, with their final draft pick, 227th overall, took Nick Muse, the tight end of South Carolina. Finally, the Vikings took a tight end. I also talked about tight end being a big need for the Vikings. The Vikings waited till the 7th round to take a tight end. But with that being said, even though the Vikings waited until the 7th round to take a tight end, they realistically drafted a wide receiver. Nick Muse is not at all going to be the big blocking tight end that Kevin O'Connell likes. I mean, looking at Kevin O'Connell, how he used tight ends in the past, I'm surprised the Vikings actually drafted Nick Muse. As like I said, this guy's pretty much a wide receiver. So his role on our offense, if he does ever get an opportunity to play on the active roster, his role in our offense will mostly be in the red zone and in the receiving yards and after the catch. Still, I don't hate the draft pick. I like it a lot, and I'm not grading 7th round draft picks because realistically, if this player makes the roster, it's a hit of a draft pick. In the 6th and 7th round, that's really the floor, is we're hoping that they make the roster at that point. So I do like this draft a lot. Vikings drafted 10 draft picks in the 2022 Vikings draft class, and I do love this draft, especially looking at Chandler taking him. I believe he's going to be a solid backup in the future. Andrew Booth Jr. is going to be a stud as an outside corner if he's able to stay healthy. That's the big thing with him. Lewis Cine, obviously, I believe he's going to work in the league. I think him taking 32nd overall was a perfect draft pick. It's just the trade that I absolutely hate. But with all that being said, great draft pick from Kwesi. Love the draft picks coming into this team, and I'm so excited to see how this pans out. Maybe 2 years from now, we look at this draft as one of the best in franchise history. Maybe we'll look at it as the worst draft class in franchise history. We have no clue, which is why these draft grades, take them all from a grain of salt, because let's be honest, I doubt a lot of these are going to be correct at all. So these are just my personal opinion, and I want to hear what you all feel about this draft class for the Minnesota Vikings. Thank you.